Hello, welcome to the University of Brighton podcast. I'm Richard Newman. Thanks for listening. This is episode 110 of the podcast. And my guests this week are from Brighton CCA, the University of Brighton Centre for Contemporary Arts. The CCA has just celebrated its first anniversary. And as we all know, the arts has been heavily hit by the coronavirus pandemic, but the CCA has been inventive in a way that it's organised a programme online and planning ahead for post-lockdown, a post-COVID world. We're going to talk all about that shortly. So joining me is Artistic Director Ben Roberts and Polly Wright, the CCA's programme producer. But thanks so much to both of you for coming on. Ben, you've been on before, way back in March 2019, when the concept was still in its infancy, really. You didn't have much of a, don't even know if you had a team back then. We'll come back to you in a second. But Polly, let's get to know you a little bit first. How long have you been with the CCA and how have you arrived at this point?
I've been here since last August, so yeah, I've been here a year and a bit now. Can't remember the second part of your question.
What's your background? How did you kind of arrive at this point?
So I've worked in the arts for almost a decade. So I studied in London, studying criticism, curation and communication. And since then I've worked in a number of contemporary art organisations, so Art on the Underground, and then Film and Video Umbrella, and now Brighton CCA. So I've been a programme coordinator in a number of those places. So always worked with people, kind of thinking about the arts and commissioning and research. And then, now within Brighton CCA.
Cool. Ben, I think it's a good idea to sort of set the scene again and tell us in brief what this Brighton CCA is and does.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back so we can talk about the first year. I guess Brighton CCA is a whole range of things. It's set across the galleries at Grand Parade, but it also includes, or used to include pre-COVID, some of the things that happened in the theatre. And I'm delighted to say that we're also going to be launching in the near future a project space over at Dorset Place as well. So what we are aiming to do essentially is to provide a programme of international contemporary art in the galleries for the City of Brighton, for the nation, if you like. We have a sort of international reach as well. So over the course of each year, we have a programme of 3 or 4 exhibitions. They're usually commissions from young-ish and emerging artists or mid-career artists who want to try something new, because a big part of what we're about is offering the resources of the university in terms of production, in terms of expertise and researchers' knowledge to artists to help them develop their practice. And whilst they're doing that, we want to create programs in the gallery and around them that give people an insight and a view onto how artists work and how it is that a lot of contemporary art actually happens in that sort of way, because so much of what artists are interested in these days is not just about art, but it's about lots of different things. And there's a real opportunity here for people to both see the work and to see the processes that underpin how that happens. Mm-hmm.
And if you're watching the YouTube version, you're in one of the spaces right now. Looks great. If you're not watching on YouTube, head over and have a look. But when we talked in March last year, it was all a bit hush-hush with what the plans were pre-COVID. And how's everything gone since the October launch in 2019?
It's been really, really positive, actually. We've had a huge flood of visitors who have come in, who have been really engaging with the shows that we've had. So we've managed up until COVID to put on something like, I think it's 5 exhibitions, nearly 100 different events. We've had over 10,000 visitors coming through the doors and visiting our online platforms. And that's been with more sort of established artists, like we opened with Franz Erhard Wolter, for example, but we've also had some real successes with, for example, Giles Round, who is an artist who came and did a collaboration between us and the Brighton Design Archives. He was here in the galleries. We had an installation in this space, and he also made a show in the other space where he was using material from the archives to develop new work himself, which appeared in the galleries over time, and also had a really strong public program where people could come into the galleries, help him make films, or show films rather, make work, and do all sorts of other sorts of projects that Polly was working on over the course of the show, which was sort of, again, you know, this idea about sort of people being able to engage with an artist's practice as it was happening in the space. And so there were lots of things for the students to do as well, for them to come and work on him with various printing projects and talks and different things like that. So we're now in our, I think, 5th show, the one behind us, which is Flo Brooks. And unlike the last show, we did lose a show to COVID. So it opened on the day of first lockdown and no one was able to see it. And sadly, we had to send it back to its various owners before we could reopen. But I'm really pleased to say that we managed to get this show open just before the second lockdown happened. So people have been able to see it. Students have been able to come during this second lockdown, obviously enough because the university is open, which has been super positive. We've been able to have lots of tours and some socially distanced workshops and things like that. So that's really continuing. And even during these lockdown periods, we've managed to migrate a lot of the things that people can see and do around the shows online. So you can also see documentation of all of the shows as well. And various videos and introductions to that. So yeah, it's been really positive. We've managed to get a lot of things done and really looking forward to the end of this lockdown and being able to welcome visitors back into the space and get on with the programming for next year as well.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that in just a bit. Polly, when you came in, a new venue, probably quite an exciting opportunity for you, I guess, to have a bit of working with Ben and the team to have a bit of a free reign at producing this program. What's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's been it's really interesting being within the university. So you're kind of working between students and the research going on here, as well as programming for a public audience. So I think that's something worth to note. And often the workshops we've done have been with a range of students, but also people that haven't studied here, and kind of bringing people together like that, I think is really valuable and exciting, both sides. I think it opens up a lot of different questions of what the arts can do and be. So yeah, I think it's one of the first jobs I've had working across quite a lot of different mediums. So that's been really great. So thinking about different ways to do workshops, but also by being online for COVID, there was a lot of time spent how to make things digital and how to integrate a program to not only be for a local audience, but one that is potentially global. So I think that puts Brighton on a map in a different way. So yeah, that's maybe helped answer that question.
Yeah, and the idea of the CCA is to become, you know, one of the premier arts venues in Brighton and Hove, so they can have that global, well, national and global reach. So for people that might be new to the CCA, and I guess people that maybe just targeting first people that are in Brighton and Hove, when you reopen, why should they be coming to the CCA? What are you going to offer?
Well, I think we're offering a whole bunch of things. I think one of the reasons to come is because I think something that people have discovered, and certainly that we've discovered over the course of the pandemic and over lockdown, is that the opportunities for, or basically what culture can offer people, has become really important. That sort of sense of creativity, that sort of way of looking at the world and using culture as a way to connect with different ideas and spaces, not just in your own home and in your own mind, but sort of physically out in the world, is something that's been really brilliant and supportive, and something that we've tried to help with and done quite a lot of over the last few months. And I think when you come to the galleries and when you come and experience the program here, it's something that is really built on that. It's a really rich seam of engagement with ideas and people that you'll get. I'm delighted to be able to say that the current exhibition that we have, the Flo Brooks Angled Twitch with the Daily Winds Tourist Office, is going to be open for an extended period of time after the new year. We had planned to close just before Christmas, but we're now able to continue the show running until the end of January. So people will have an opportunity to come and see the actual physical artworks, which is much the best way to do it. You know, you can see them online, but it's not the same experience really. But also to engage with some of our programs. And one of the key things about this show is that it's about bringing different communities together, about conversations that people have which engage with the ideas in the show and offering people a chance to contribute. So both online and physically, people will be able to really engage with some of the ideas and the programs that are happening here, to meet the artists and to really have a much fuller experience than they will have done previously.
Yeah, great. And I mean, the question to both of you really, since we've had, the majority of this year now has been under some sort of form of restriction, especially during lockdown, where you sort of had those things taken away from you that you love. If you love art, if you love anything in the creative world, we haven't really been able to experience it with our own eyes physically, and it's really people have really missed that, haven't they? I mean, you can say it across all different kinds of industries, the creative arts, I don't know, sports, all these kind of things. People can't be there, and being there is really huge. So when you open those doors again, I guess you're seeing quite a lot of people who have really missed that experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also been a very intense time of reflection for people. So obviously being in your own domestic space for the first lockdown for quite a prolonged period, and then kind of knowing that you've shared that experience but being isolated within that. I think that's also something we've been thinking about within the future programme. So different ways of joining back together again, and not necessarily offering only the same experience, but something that slightly thinks about that, or makes new connections, or re-understand some of those things we've all been thinking about, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one of the things about the pandemic, I suppose, is that it's made us think differently about as Polly's saying, the types of programs that we offer, and trying not to necessarily just focus everything on what happens in the gallery, but thinking about how we can create opportunities for people to engage with culture outside, in a way that perhaps doesn't necessarily require us to sort of be in an enclosed space. I mean, for us, as a visual arts organisation, we're very fortunate in that galleries are fairly large open spaces, and people feel safer to come and visit them and look at shows like this and engage with things, and we can do things in this space that perhaps it would be harder in a theatre, for example, or a small music venue. But thinking about what artists can offer people in their own homes, for example, I think is really important. And also just giving people a sense of actually what it is to make art, to give them a sort of almost a permission to let their own creativity, run away with them, and think that actually, I could do this, and that does count as an art practice as a kind, because people are still not necessarily confident in what contemporary art is. It can be a very sort of alienating thing in some ways if you don't have that confidence, and part of what we want to do with this is to try and break down some of those barriers and get people feeling that culture is for everyone and that art is for everyone, and that they should be able to enjoy it wherever they are, and sort of be able to use those experiences in their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk about the practicalities of what you did when COVID hit, when the first lockdown hit, all the plans that you had in place for this year, very, really exciting program of what you wanted to do. Just emotionally, when it hit, huge blow, what were the sort of initial thoughts, those first few days? What were you thinking?
I guess I can't speak for Polly, but I was, I guess, hoping that it, I guess like everyone, surely this can't last for too long, hoping that perhaps, we would just sort of get back to normal as soon as possible. But I think after that initial shock of thinking, well, we put all this work into this thing, and now it's sort of, come to a dead stop. What do we do there? And one of the first things you start to think about is, sort of how can we respond to this situation? Because actually what you realize is that we, as an organization, are in an incredibly fortunate position, and, totally realize that, as being part of the university, we can be partially open for students now. We have so much to offer people in that we are able to project out, to give people things, whilst they're stuck at home, or, when they're isolating or what have you. So it began to be this sort of thing where you think about, actually, yeah, it's really frustrating that we can't be there, but hold on a minute, we've got all of this resource. Let's make that available. How can we sort of change around this? Because that's one of the things that culture is really great at, is finding solutions to things and thinking about things differently, sort of changing your perspective as quickly as you need to. So whilst it was frustrating in those early days, it sort of quickly became a sort of actually quite an exciting challenge. And it's been, we've been working all the way through, and Polly's done amazing work on the communal public programs and the Make It Work, which you can talk about how we did that. It sort of changed it into a different sort of dynamic for us.
Yeah, it was definitely a sharp turnaround for everyone, I think. It feels like years ago now, but definitely felt apocalyptic in some senses. But then, as Ben's saying, we definitely found ways quite quickly. I think Communal was the program we had starting the week after lockdown hit. And because we were working with a lot of different organisations, some based in Brighton, and different artists and researchers, and because we weren't furloughed, there was a really nice spirit of keeping going, or making sure we could keep working with people to deliver what we'd kind of said we would. And that had been in the planning for kind of 6 months beforehand. But yeah, definitely a sharp U-turn to making sure you had enough things at home to work with as well.
Yeah, exactly. The program that you put on in that time has been really impressive, because there's been so much there online. But before we could all come out of that initial lockdown, can you talk us through some of the highlights that you've been proudest of, but also sort of, is there anything there that you think we're going to, whether we're open or not, this is something we need to actually continue doing, and maybe you wouldn't have thought about it so much before?
Yeah, I think so one of the highlights from lockdown was definitely a number of the making workshops that we translated to being online. So we did a life drawing workshop that had over 40 people attend, and it felt very like of a time, because people maybe wanted to connect and be creative for an hour in those kind of first weeks of not really knowing what that was going to feel like. And then I would say something we probably keep trying to do was we worked with Cinenova, which is a film archive. And whereas we'd normally always think about film screenings as being in the space, and we would get an audience of so many, with this particular project, we managed to reach, kind of 150 people plus kind of all over the world. So that felt like something we'd probably like to continue, is how do you think about, community and a network, but going beyond that to maybe finding other like-minded or people that are interested in the same things elsewhere in the world. So we learned a lot through doing everything digitally, definitely.
Yeah, I think the thing about that sort of idea of not just the program and the sort of making and sort of working with artists that has been really important, that I think has been really valuable to us. But we also started a podcast series talking to different creative organizations and curators about how they had sustained their creative communities and how they had sort of managed to keep their organizations and themselves going. And I think those sort of shared conversations about what other people are doing were really valuable, and people have really enjoyed listening to them. And they're all still on our website, so you can check them out. But I think that has been something that we've thought about in terms of, it's not just the program, but it's the ideas around it, and it's what other people are doing, and being a hub for that sort of discussion has been really valuable for us. And it's been sustaining to sort of know what other people are up to as well, and sort of hear the sort of the challenges that they face and the solutions that they've come up with, as much as anything else. I think, and that's certainly something we want to keep going, is that sort of wider conversation about what we're doing and what place it has in the city and in a sort of in a sector and a sort of national community as well.
Mm-hmm. So if we look back, before we look forward, what we've got coming up, hopefully, and everything's going to be absolutely fine. So we're going to be both absolutely fine. No more restrictions. But let's look back over the first year. What would you both pick out as your sort of real highlight from the first year as Brighton CCA?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a tough one. I think for me, it would probably be some of the opening performances that we did for Franz Erhard Volta with some of his really seminal sculptural pieces that we had really giant crowds to come and see, and people were able to engage with that. I think that was, for me, a really exciting project. And also the commissioning of Flo's show here, I think, has been really great. I mean, it's been such a long time in the coming. You know, we've been in conversation about these works for over a year, seen them develop, had those sort of conversations, and to finally get to this point, even in COVID, and to be able to open that show, and for it to feel so sort of, in a way, current, you know, with our situation, you know, this idea about things feeling familiar but also isolated, you know, sort of how different communities look after each other, and we know what those sort of concepts of care can be, has been, yeah, really serendipitous in lots of ways, but is a really satisfying thing to see come together. That's for me. I don't know what Polly's highlight would be.
Yeah, many as well, but I'll maybe mention the punk gig we did for Giles Brown's exhibition. Was just a really exciting event to kind of organise, especially inviting in a punk music performance within a gallery space. I think felt like, yeah, something we would like to continue when we can, but it was, yeah, kind of playing with a gallery space and who that can really be for and what are the rules in that. And I think having that within Giles's work that was very much inspired by a design archive that might feel quite organized, or yeah, and then turning it into something that thinks about punk music was really exciting.
So that now sorry, go on, Ben.
No, I was going to say, I think that was a really exciting night. It was something we'd love to be able to get back to doing.
Yeah,
the Friday night, it's really cool.
Yeah, well, look, we're recording this in November. At the moment, it's lockdown too. But the last few weeks, we've had it's been so much more positive looking forward, hasn't it? With the hope of vaccines too already, and we've got, you know, hopefully plenty more to come as well. So there seems to be this little light at the end of the tunnel now, doesn't there, in terms of you being able to plan forward and really look forward to 2021. But before we get to that, I mean, you mentioned Flo Brooks a couple of times. We've got you're sort of sitting inside that program at the moment. So tell us what this one is all about, and for the students and staff who are lucky enough to still be able to come and see it, what can they expect? And even I guess you're pitching for the people that, you know, in a couple of weeks' time they can come back through the doors again.
Sure. So the show that we have here is, I mean, you can see sort of only part of it here, but it's a show that's sort of in two halves. So Flo is an artist that's based in Brighton, and he is a painter, but also works across sort of social engagement projects and publishing and various things like that, collage. But what we've done here is to commission an entirely new body of work where a lot of his paintings and his work up to date have been sort of semi-autobiographical. So they're sort of talking about his experiences transitioning in the NHS, or sort of so queer and social scenes in London. But what he's done here is gone back to his roots growing up in the sort of southwest of England, in Cornwall. And he's created a series of 5 works, which are sort of groupings of paintings all together, which talk about ideas of the rural and what it's like to sort of live and grow up there. So they're sort of based around various archetypes that you might find there. So like a sort of the rural post office, the bus stop, the holiday let, for example. And they're sort of they're very dynamic images. They're quite graphic and sort of figurative, so you can sort of see what's going on there. But they're about describing a set of lived experiences and memories of what it was like in those places. He's set them in a new installation. So normally he would just show them in a white box, but here he's designed the space around them. You know, there are other things in there that are parts of the installation which speak to the sort of experience of the things that are in there. So they're sort of like a sort of drafty rural barn or something like this. You know, sort of there are bits of plastic clapping around and sort of metal gates and all this sort of stuff. And that sort of centering within a sort of installation has been a step forward for him, as has the scale of the work, because they're much bigger than a lot of his previous ones. So as you come from that space into this one, you're stepping into another installation, which is called the Daily Winds Tourist Information Centre, which is really about trying to sort of echo that sort of classic idea of a sort of rural, you know, parochial sort of slightly sort of institutional tourist office with a sort of plasticky feel to it, and things not quite all filled up and maybe a bit sort of tacky in places. And in using that vernacular, we've tried to create a space, or we've created a space that is laying host to a whole lot of public programs that Polly has been working on with Flo, as he's developed some of those ideas and invited people in Brighton to come and make contributions to them. But I think Polly would be better placed to speak about that than me.
Yeah, so it started out as working with Flo. Obviously, quite a lot of that was done during lockdown as well. So kind of how do you start to imagine a public programme when you're very much housebound? But I know he was really keen to work with a number of artists and friends that live in Brighton to expand that theme, so it wasn't just coming from one voice, the kind of experiences of being marginalised in a rural place. And so there are a number of elements of that process on display. So some artwork, some ephemera, some different kind of zines, some different book lists that we've put together. There's a big map of Brighton on the window that will be kind of pinpointing different contributions on part fiction, part kind of function. We've had different film screenings developed as part of that, as well as some podcasts and a reading group. So it's a way of expanding the research that feels very key to the paintings, but doing it with multiple voices rather than necessarily coming down from one. So we're still ongoing with a lot of that at the moment.
Great. And before we get on to what's coming up in the new year, Ben, you started the podcast with a bit of with some breaking news, really, with the new project space. I think it was you were going to talk about. Can you tell us about that? Yeah,
sure. So the Dorset Place space is going to be our new sort of research and experimental sort of project space. It's over towards Edward Street as part of that sort of building, and it's down that little sort of cul-de-sac there. And it's a single room space, so quite a nice sort of size, really. It's not too giant, and it's got windows, as here, it's themed for the CCA, so you can see in from the street. But really what we're wanting to do with that is use it as a space that is perhaps a little more flexible, a bit more light touch. So already we've been working with arts organisations in Brighton to invite them in to do small shows in there that maybe last a couple of weeks, or a month, sort of short things. And moving forward, there's going to be opportunities for the students at Brighton as well to, during term time, they'll be staging sort of fortnightly exhibitions in there to sort of try stuff out, to learn about how that works, and to sort of show projects in there. We'll also be inviting more organisations from Brighton and from other parts of the UK to come and present work, specific researchers to come and sort of use it as a space for engagement with their work as well. So it's going to be a really exciting sort of dynamic sort of space, I think, which is can be used for projects that happen both inside that space and in the sort of space outside it on the street as well. It's a sort of a very fast-moving program as well. So we don't want to be sort of saying, oh right, it's now booked up for the entire year. We're going to be inviting sort of proposals for that. It's going to be a bit more sort of part of a community sort of feel, if you like, and something that is available to a much wider audience, which sits alongside what we do in these main galleries, but is a very different sort of approach to programming, which we're really excited about.
Great. Okay, so what have we got coming up in 2021? What's the plan? What's the big vision? I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? Should we go? Let's go what's in the gallery spaces, I guess, for the program first, and then we'll talk about maybe what's going to go, what we're hoping to go past that in a sort of post-COVID or slightly less restricted world.
Sure. So I think in the gallery spaces, as I was saying, I mean, we're delighted that we're able to extend Flo Brooks's run for a short while into January. After Flo comes a really exciting new commission again, set of sculptures by an emerging Russian artist called Nika Nilova. And her practice is really, up until now, has been focused on a sort of archaeological approach to architecture. So taking items from buildings, thinking about their history, remaking them into objects. But for this program, she has changed her focus a little bit and has been thinking about strategies found in nature to do with coping with water scarcity and environmental concerns, and how humans have managed water flow over millennia, really, as one of the most precious resources that we have, really. So she's made a whole body of work, sculptures around that will be shown in the South Gallery there, and there will be a sort of kind of a functioning research studio space that will sit alongside that, which some of the works made in this space will then migrate into the gallery, but there'll be opportunities for other artists to be invited in and to present some of their research which relates to Nika's. There'll be film programs and various sort of public things that will be going on that Polly's been working on as well alongside that. Following that, we're all hoping that there might be an opportunity for a graduate show at some stage during the summer, but we don't really know what's going to happen there. But we will also be staging another big show by Brazilian artist Alexander de Cunha, who has made a new body of work specifically for these spaces, and that exhibition will be opening later in the summer. After that, we'll be showing a really exciting new set of sculptures and audio works by a collective called the Lloyd Corporation, who are based in Athens and in London, and they'll be opening in the autumn. And their practice is about a sort of object-orientated ontology, so it's like how whole stories and histories can be embodied in a single sort of object. And they've been looking at local history around Brighton and thinking about barrels as a way of thinking about languages of trade and exchange, and but also about celebration and myth, and how these things are all interwoven with the local culture, but also in these objects. And so they're going to be making a big new piece of work that will be shown here for the first time in the autumn. So assuming that everything goes to plan, those are a whole sort of set of shows that may move around a little bit depending on COVID-based restrictions, but so far we managed to keep to that schedule, and really looking forward to working with a lot of those guys.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I guess, Polly, once everything gets booked, it's probably quite exciting for you to put the whole rest of the program together, goes alongside that. So what sort of things are you looking at to sort of complement that?
Yeah, definitely. So what I'm looking forward to next year is working with a few different student groups to kind of respond directly to some of those exhibitions. So they're kind of special projects that I'll be working with different student groups on, which feels really exciting. Alongside that, we continue to work with artists and researchers to also respond. Something we haven't mentioned in this podcast yet is the Expanding Dialogues program, or our kind of dialogue section of the website. So that's a kind of special project where for the first one we worked with 2 artists and a group of advanced engineers. So that's a way of working with a different section of the university to also think about arts and culture. So we'll be doing a few more of those to go alongside the exhibitions as they come. So keeping thinking about what questions we're asking and why we're asking them now, and how can we continue to expand that maybe across disciplines and not only arts.
That's great. I mean, because I certainly find it for myself when I'm doing these podcasts, the university is just sort of this endless content resource. If you wanted to talk about something, you can find someone to talk about it. And I guess, is that something you might be looking at in the long term then, to sort of delve into some of the expertise across the entire university, across different schools and departments, and bring them into a more creative space?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for Nika's, we were just talking about that today, weren't we? So there's certain elements of what Ben's already described, and that some of her research or what her art practice is interested in, that we'll also be thinking about with academics at the university, which I think is really exciting and definitely helps us contextualize where we are and how the arts can work between different academia in different ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's something that we've tried to sort of build into the program throughout, really, since we started. It's been a really important part of how we've engaged with the wider university and students as well. It's trying to sort of bring some of that knowledge and expertise in, because one of the things I think we can offer to audiences, but also to the artists that we work with, is, as you say, there is all of this expertise and knowledge and understanding, and finding ways of folding that into the program is something that Polly and the rest of the team have been really successful about doing, and engaging with, is sort of getting those voices in here and providing a platform for that research. So, for example, earlier this year, we produced our first edition of the Grand Parade Press, which is an ongoing publication which Polly helped to edit, and which we included a whole set of different articles and commissioned pieces of writing about our programme, but also about bits of research that are happening in the university, new research centres like the Centre for Arts and Wellbeing, with sort of lots of bits of coming research laid out in there. And we're hoping to, or we're planning to, produce a second one of those for next year, which will again be about a reflection on the programme here, but also how that relates to bits of knowledge and expertise within the university. So whilst those academics will have voices within our public programmes and podcasts and in talks and so on, there's also more sort of like concrete sort of outputs, if you like, that like the Grand Parade Press, which give us an opportunity to platform some of the other things that happen in the university, which have a relation to culture, but aren't necessarily specifically things you would find in a gallery.
Brilliant. I mean, you've had like this, it's been a really difficult start, hasn't it? In terms of having that first, you had that 6 months of, complete optimism. I guess it was going really well. And then COVID happened and lockdown happened. And I guess you might almost feel like you're sort of not starting again, but like you're almost relaunching, maybe going to next year. Not really like a relaunch, but I mean, I guess what I mean more is that for students, this is a great opportunity. For students and research, it's a fantastic opportunity as well to get involved with the CCA. And obviously, it takes for something new. It takes a while for something to become integrated, but this is a fantastic opportunity. It's going to just grow and grow and grow. And for students that are maybe looking to come to the university as well, just how big an opportunity is it for them to get involved with Brighton CCA?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's been really great about what we've been able to do is that through the things that we've delivered through lockdown, are things that we're now looking to really build on and sort of do more of in lots of sorts of ways. So in the coming year, there are going to be some really great opportunities for students to come and work with us. So in Nika Nilova's programme, for example, there will be lots of chances for students to come and work with her on producing some of the actual artworks themselves, which have these sort of huge multiples that need making, and sort of giant sculptures that they could be involved in. We're going to be running some technical courses for students, exclusively for Brighton students, where our lead technicians will be teaching them about how you can go and get work and the skills that you need to work as a technician in a professional gallery. Similarly with performance and AV things, our theatre technician will be running short courses in that, so there'll be those things as well as all the public programmes that Polly is working on and that people can come and do, and some of the things that we're doing with courses where we're providing bespoke tours and training for students to come. And, it's, apart from anything else, for the university, I think, is starting to be understood what resources can be for us publicly. When we were having open days just recently, we had students who were coming, or prospective students who were coming, couldn't see so much going on in the studios because of the restrictions, but the galleries are open, our invigilators are ex-students, and they're sort of able to explain, sort of the opportunities that were offered and what this as a resource means for them. And that was a really positive thing. We had lots of really great feedback from that. So I think in terms of a relaunch, I think it's more of a sort of a continuing to build on some of the things that we've been doing. There's, I think, some skepticism perhaps in the university to begin with about, what would it be and how would it work and, all those sorts of things. But increasingly, it seems like it's been a really positive response. And now people see what those resources are and what we can do for them. And, we're open for not just the students here, but for the entire community that's here. So, yeah, it's a really exciting time to be getting back up and running and opening up some of these programs to even more people.
Yeah. It's been really exciting so far. It's been fantastic so far. So just to finish, what's the long-term vision for the CCA in this sort of, I guess, in a more normal world? I mean, let's pretend for a second that we can go back to something like before March. I guess would you be looking at getting more things in the Salus Benny Theatre, for example? What are you looking at doing, I don't know, in the next year, 2 years and further?
I think in terms of the exhibitions, we want to continue to commission new and ambitious work that we can stage in the galleries. I think it would be really great to use this moment to have a reset with the theatre and think about how we use that space, whether it continues to be used for teaching or whether it can be used for performance, and how we can best make the most of that in terms of some of the commissions that we have here and supporting different artists. But one of the things that Polly's been working on, and one of the things that we've been doing recently, is collaborative projects, working with the festival, working with other organisations like Tramway up in Glasgow, where Flo's show is going to travel to after it's been here, and working with some of those organisations to sort of deliver even bigger projects, so that the things that we do here become have access to a bigger audience. So Brighton CCA as a place becomes known as something that is generating really exciting work, which is traveling around the country, which is traveling internationally, and is making a really innovative, taking a really innovative curatorial approach to not just showing work, but how it's developed and how we are able to get people to engage with it. And that happens through the commissions, it happens through the public programs that Polly works on, and what we're really looking forward to is growing those as much as possible in the coming 2 years.
Polly, just to finish, how excited are you about what's coming up and all the sort of potential that's around the CCA?
I'm really excited for when we can welcome more than 6 people into the gallery. Some of the events, what can be so rich as part of the events is the conversations that happen just before you've started, or maybe in the middle during a break, or some of the after, and who kind of meets each other here. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, that not being only students coming to a certain event or the public, but that really mixing. And I think it's going to be great. Looking forward to hosting some of those more social elements of events again.
Cool. Ben, Polly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really great to have you on and to hear about everything over the last year and all the exciting bits we've got coming up. You can find out more about what is coming up and more about Brighton CCA in general at brightonscca.art. And that's about it for this podcast. But do subscribe and leave a review if you can. Share all this on social media as well. Thanks for listening.